Hey everyone, Andy here, and in this video I'm going to show you how I would paint a Stormcast Eternals army. Personally, I've never had a desire to paint Stormcast Eternals for an army, and I think the first ones, they're a little bit chunky and a little bit soulless. They just don't do anything for me. And there's three key things that made me change my mind and really start to like Stormcast Eternals. The first one is the obvious. The new slimmer sculpts are fantastic. I really like the proportions. I like the legs, how they're closer together and more realistic poses. I think the new shoulder pad shapes are amazing. They're just brilliant. And the new ones from the new box set that Games Workshop sent to us, I think they're even better than the ones before, just a slight upgrade. And one of the key things, and this is another thing that's important to me, is the quality of sculpts of the bear heads. Now for me, I don't love the helmet design. I get it that it's supposed to be kind of soulless, but I really like them with a bear head. I think it totally transforms the look, and it was actually seeing these, like the pictures, seeing this one in particular, I thought, wow, that sculpt of that bear head is really good, and yeah, it totally changes it for me. The third is the silver color scheme, but it has to be, for me to like it, kind of weathered and battered down. But I think as soon as you switch from the shiny brand new gold to a weathered, a dark silver, then it feels more like some kind of cool medieval knight. So yeah, those three things, but mainly a bear head, and I would do that on every Stormcast, to be honest. I think that really makes a difference. And yeah, trying to do the silver weathered. So that's what I really want to get stuck into in this video. I want to do all the bodies in a simple way, really fast, just get the metallics done, get some simple weathering on there, get the right feel, and then spend some more time on the faces. And I'm hoping that combination of a kind of grim dark weathered style silver, but then put some effort into painting the faces, is the right balance of them looking good, but not a big time sink. I'm going to do my base coats with the airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, then don't worry about it. You can do this with just a brush, no problem. It might take a little bit longer, but not tons. I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck signature series. I'm using the Infinity. I really like the weight of the all aluminium Infinity. It's just, nice and light if you're doing a big army painting session. And I use the 0.4mm needle because it gives me far fewer problems than using a 0.2, especially if you're doing something like I'm doing today, spraying metallics. It's just going to go through easier, it's going to be easier to clean, and the needle's more robust. So you might think you want the 0.2 because it's finer, but if you're army painting, which is what this video is all about, the 0.4 is the one. Okay, let's get painting now, and I'm going to start with a black primer, and what I'm going to do is airbrush the face with some white. If you're brush painting, then leave the head separately, and I would suggest priming it in a light grey or something like Wraithbone. I find painting skin far easier when it has a pale primer, and just airbrushing from above with some Tamiya flat white really helps. And I'm going to spray the rest of the model, but just to demonstrate to you what we're aiming for in the end, so where we want the highlights to be for the silver and all the other colours. And then we can kind of do a side-by-side if I take a screenshot of this pre-highlight and see if we've achieved that in the end. You can see I'm going to focus all the light in the face and the top area, and then the top of the leg, but the leg underneath the shield I think is going to look cool if it's a lot darker, and I think it'll be more dramatic if we just have a lot of light in the front of this area. Obviously it's going to be different model to model, but I really love the pose of this one, and I think this is going to suit it best. For my main silver, I love Metal Color series from Vallejo, and this dark aluminium, the tone of it really suits my taste and what I wanted. If you're going to do an army, then it's worth getting a pot of this. It's going to last for the whole army, and it's so easy to use and works in the airbrush really well. You can brush it on as well, and I just think this is a better buy than a lot of metallic paints out there. When I was recording the video, I decided to go from light to dark, so I started off with the dark aluminium. Maybe it would be better to start with the darkest color. I think if I was brushing it on, I would start with this light one, and then I would just gradually add shadows, and I think that would be the faster way to do it with the brush. With the airbrush, you'll see how I do it. I gradually make it darker, but I do think you could start with the darkest and build your way up. So as we go along, you'll see what I mean. My first shadow is going to be Iron Warriors. I really like this paint. I prefer it to Lead Belcher because it's just got a little more colour to it. And what I'm going to do here is just spray from below to try and catch all the shadow parts, but also really focus on, that leg. I want it to be darker, and just try and get some shading and trying to miss the areas I want to be a highlight. I don't use the contrast paints a lot, but for metallics, I think they're fantastic. You can see I'm opening this Black Legion for the first time, and I wasn't sure how good it was going to be, but I really, really liked it. This is going to work with brush or the airbrush, but we're just going to add it to the Iron Warriors a little bit at a time, and I'm going to keep making it darker until I've got the right amount of shading that I want. I started to deepen the shading, kind of just doing the same thing I did with the Iron Warriors. I'm going a little bit slower. I found I over diluted it. I'm using Vallejo thinner for all of this process, and I just put a little bit too much in there, which meant it spread, as you can see on the hammer here. If you do make it too thin, you can just obviously add a little more paint, or just take your time to let it dry between the layers. I added even more of the Black Legion, and yeah, I absolutely love how this works with the airbrush. It dulls the shine of the metallics, which is what I want in the shadows, but not too much that it looks like straight up black. So I think it's the right balance. You can achieve this with a black ink, but from trial and error, I think I do prefer this. I think it offers you just a tiny bit more control than an ink. So here you go, I've darkened it down, and I really like how dark that metal is. I did cover up a bit too much and make some mistakes, so what I'm going to do is apply my Iron Warriors and my dark aluminium again, and this is why I think you could start from the dark colour and then build it up. Either way, you're going to get a good result, but just don't be afraid to go back with the previous colours to correct any mistakes. You're airbrushing, it doesn't take that long, so I think it's worth just going over it again. So here I grabbed the Iron Warriors, and I just put a little more highlighting where I think it's a little bit dark in some of those spots. Obviously I'm spraying from above here, so it's going to stay dark where I want it anyway. I then reapplied the dark aluminium, and I tried to be as careful as I could with the airbrush, as I did some mistakes before and I'm trying to cover those up. But yeah, I think this back and forth process is worth doing, and you'll find you'll do fewer mistakes as you get better with practice. And if you're painting a batch of say 20 Stormcast, probably some will go absolutely fine and they don't need any corrections, but then you'll just get somewhere something happens. But when you see the rest of the process is so fast, I think you can spend a little bit of time on this. We've got a range of paints coming out, and we're really hoping to get those out soon, so I'm starting to incorporate those in some of my paint jobs. And there's some desaturated blues that I haven't used tons yet, so I wanted to try those out on the shield. So it's just two of the blues from our set coming soon. If you want something similar, then I'd maybe use Scale 75, Caspian Blue, something like that. But yeah, these won't be too far away until you can order those. But just pick any blue you like, really. And I base coat these with the brush, but then I'm going to use the airbrush to do the highlights. I couldn't airbrush without hitting the silver, the base coat, but I think I can manage the highlights. And of course, you can just brush these on, no problem. But as this is an army, I really want to just get these highlights done as quick as possible. I really think I should have exaggerated this, because when I did some washes later on, it dulled it down, but when I was painting it like this point, it felt like I had enough, so maybe I should have pushed and done a lighter blue, just exaggerated that a touch. I think using slightly more desaturated blues than the box art helps to get a look I want, rather than a really vivid bright blue. It's kind of the same as weathering the silver. Yeah, just having slightly duller colours I think makes them feel a little bit cooler in my opinion. That's all the airbrushing done now, so it's not too much. And I'm just going to go ahead and block in everything really. And I start with the gold parts. I'm going to use Runelord Brass. Again, this is a not particularly vivid gold. Well, it's a brass, of course. But yeah, I really, really like this paint. I think it's fantastic. And something like Retributor, the really vibrant gold, I never really like. It's a little bit too yellow. And I think this works really nicely with the blue as well. I base coated all the leather parts with Mournfang Brown, but I later changed it to Rhinox Hide, as yeah, I just prefer the colder, darker brown of Rhinox. This is a little bit too orange, and yeah, I just wanted something more boring, to be honest. Parchment paper bit, I started with Zandri Dust as a base coat, and I just built up with some Ushabti Bone. And you could highlight with this and do it properly, or you can just base coat it flat and then the wash will do its work later on. When I base coated everything, then I just quickly added some sand to the base. Now everything is base coated, I want to use some oil paints to kind of wash everything at the same time, and this is why this is going to be really quick and fantastic for an army. For me, it's really important that this is an oil wash, and if you're afraid of trying oil washes, they're really, really easy. I love this raw Umber, and I'm using the fast drying one from Winsor Newton. I would avoid the Winton, which is a cheaper oil paint, but this fast drying one I really, really like. I line a little metal tray with some foil because then I can just throw the foil away. And yeah, just don't be afraid when you're trying out the oils. I'm not using any varnish or anything. Using the Sans Odor thinners means it's not going to ruin the paint, and I had zero problems. You can see there's a little bit of oil coming out here. You could put this onto cardboard first and then transfer that paint where the oil has left into your metal tray. That would be better than what I've done here. So I'm going to add a little bit of thinner, and honestly, just don't be too fussy about how much you add. It's going to be easy to change the dilution. I'm going to mix in the thick paint until I've got a pretty translucent wash, and you can really vary how opaque this wash is for doing different things. And I'll just leave a little blob of the thick paint kind of on the side of the dish, but in the middle I've just got this very usable, nice thin wash. So then I just go ahead and apply it to every part of the model. I'd go quite carefully. I don't like the method where you remove it with a cotton bud. That's not to my taste. So I try to get the dilution more or less right. And you can instantly tell if you've got it right. If it's too thick on the model, you just don't have to worry because you can get some thinner on your brush and kind of dilute it on the model. And if it's too thin and nothing happens, obviously you can just add in some more paint. So this is why I think don't be afraid of trying oils out. It is really easy and the capillary action is super satisfying. I really think this makes a massive difference to the metallics. It's got the right balance of kind of matting them down, but not too much. And it's something that's almost intangible, but when you see it in real life, it just gives this finish that's kind of hard to replicate with normal washes. And yeah, that's why oils are so key for me when using metallics. I take some thick paint just on the side, and then I start to try doing basically battle damage, little chips and things like that. And the cool thing about this is if you do chips you don't like, you do too many of them, then you can just wipe them away, which is awesome. And yeah, I really like the versatility of these oils, but being able to wipe away things you don't like is very useful. So here the surface is kind of wet where I've done my wash all over. So when I add the little dots of oil paint, it will slightly diffuse them, which is epic. It looks so good and kind of subtle. So you can put them on, thick, and then you can go in with the brush and soften them up. You can see I'm just erasing them here just to demonstrate that to you. But yeah, you can just kind of have fun and experiment with how many chips you have, where they are, and just find a look that you're into, really. I focused on the hip, putting little chips on the edge, and maybe this isn't chips, it could be little dents that have got mud in or something like that, pitting. Either way, I think it's just going to look cooler having some damage and some more weathering onto this silver. So yeah, you're kind of doing two things at once with the oil wash, getting the recesses done, but also adding some interest with that damage. I also washed the sand at the same time, as that's really, really easy. Hopefully you agree that was super quick to do, and what I want to do now is put some focus into the face and try and make this look great. The oil wash takes quite a long time to dry, so it's kind of perfect to put it to the side, work on the face, and then I'll put them both together. I like the kind of glowing eyes from the lightning or whatever the Stormcast have from the trailers and stuff, so I thought it'd be cool to include that. And this will hopefully, even though we're making it look kind of like a normal human with the bare head and the kind of boring armor color, I think some glowing eyes will look cool. I'm going to use blue-green from AK, and because we have the white face, it's going to be really easy to just wash that around the eyes. So I dilute it quite a lot and just try and let that flow into the recesses so I can see where the eyes are. Eyes are always super tricky, but doing them with a glow is going to make it easier. And also just starting with this wash over a pale primer, that's going to help make it easier as well. I then highlighted the eyes with a mix of the same blue, green and ivory. And you can do as many steps as you want with this. And if you make any mistakes, you can just wash the blue, green again and have another go. I think I did 2 steps adding in the ivory to get it kind of bright enough, and they weren't perfect, but I just kind of left it. It'll be good enough, I think. I'm going to do some base coats roughly now, just to hopefully avoid mistakes. So I'm going to paint all of the skin with pretty diluted Cadian Flesh. And again, this is to kind of flow into some of the recesses to help me see where I'm going and work out where the highlights need to be picked out. And then I blocked in the hair with Rhinox Hide, so that's kind of the base coating done. Hopefully I don't make too many mistakes then. For the skin, I'm going to use probably the most commonly used paints in our hobby. That's Cadian Flesh, Kislev Flesh, just colours that everyone knows, and these are absolutely fine. I like the satin finish, and I really think these are great. I'm going to add some yellow to the Kislev Flesh to do some highlighting. And then I'm going to add some red leather from Vallejo to the Cadian Flesh for our shadows. Using a red for the shadow and a yellow in the highlight, it's going to give a strong contrast. And there are different types of contrast. So if we just add black and white, that's just going to change the value. But if we have this red against the yellow, it's going to give a really good contrast of the hue, the color of the paints. This means we'll have to rely less on the values to get the contrast we want in the skin, and hopefully it should give it more life and interest. I'm just going to add them to the palette to show you how I'll mix up and make these tones. So we've got 2 blobs of Cadian, 2 blobs of Kislev, and then I've got the ice or pastel yellow. And I've got the Cavalry Brown here, which I'll show you what that does. It's maybe a little bit too red. It works absolutely fine, but I think the red leather I slightly prefer. As I gradually add the pastel yellow to the Kislev Flesh, it's a really powerful, nice looking skin tone, and a little bit of yellow will just help make it stand out more than something like just white or ivory. Adding the red to the Cadian Flesh, yeah, it just makes a nice looking skin color. It's a little bit like the blood underneath our skin, giving that depth. The key though is when you put these paints next to each other, that really strong yellow highlight against the red shadow, that's going to give a lot of contrast. And it's quite easy, you can just add a little bit to your 2 normal skin paints and I think you'll get some nice looking skin. I then take that mix with a little bit of red in and I can dilute it to be a wash and just get that in all the recesses and the details around the nose and things like that. But then I also shade down the sides of the face, and this is so I can get a load of light around the top, the forehead, the cheeks, the nose, just to really draw the eyes to the top of the face, that focal point, and of course, around the blue eyes. I then start to do the highlights, but I really focus on the cheeks, the nose, the forehead. I don't really do much to the sides of the face because I want them to be in shadow. And I start with the Kislev Flesh on its own because our base coat, of course, was the Cadian Flesh. And at this point, I go in and I kind of get rid of the blue where there's too much of it around the eyes from the wash. And I just kind of trim it down to leave the right amount of glow around the eyes. I then, with those mixes of Pastel Yellow, just do really, really small highlights just to kind of bring out the detail of the face. And these are really well sculpted, these faces. They're a lot easier than ones they've done in the past because, the recesses are actually in the right places and a bit more realistic. So, yeah, it's kind of more instinctive than it was before. They're definitely nicer to paint, and things like the nose details are quite obvious to work out where the highlights are. So yeah, really, really enjoyed doing this. If you're enjoying this part of the tutorial, painting the face, I just finished this bust, which was a 3-part series I did over on Patreon. And what I normally do every week is a video on Patreon, something like a display miniature. So it's really nice for me to take a break and do a gaming mini like this. But if you like this tutorial, and especially, the face we've just painted, then yeah, check out the Patreon, where I did a really detailed sort of step-by-step on painting the face of this bust and all the other elements. But I really, really enjoyed painting this bust. It was absolutely awesome. And it was fun painting that larger face and kind of learning and then coming to a gaming mini and applying what I'd learnt there, but just in a simpler, faster way, So I definitely like going between small Games Workshop minis, busts, and I think you can learn from going back and forth between these sizes of miniature. Anyway, this week I'm doing the video for YouTube, and Henry will be doing a video for Patreon. So if you want to see Henry's video this week and all the videos I've been doing, then please check out the Patreon. It really, really helps. It's what keeps me and Henry going. So we appreciate every one of you. There you go. I've done my plug. So let's get back to finishing this Stormcast. And I just do some simple details like adding a little bit more red to go around the lips and the tongue. And then I just pick out the teeth with Ushabti Bone. And these details are so small, I don't worry too much about getting them perfectly detailed, especially as it's a gaming mini. So we can finish the head now by highlighting the hair. And I used the excitingly named dark brown from AK, which isn't actually that dark. It's a good highlight for Rhinox Hide. And I painted all of the hair strands with this color. Then I added Pastel Yellow, and I'm going to use this to kind of highlight most of the things that are not metallic on this mini to make it simple. And I just focused on one section of the hair that I thought would be highlighted, and just kept adding a little bit of Pastel Yellow gradually until I thought I had enough highlighting on the hair. Right, exciting times now. Get to stick the head on the mini. So this is actually the next day, so I let the oil fully dry, and I'm loving the look of the silver now that oil has dried. As soon as I glued the head on, I was really happy. I think, the very quick metallics with a wash on look a little bit simple. Then as soon as you stick this head on that's painted quite nicely, it's just wicked, and I feel like your eyes are drawn to that face that we've painted pretty well, and it just works for me. I'm really, really happy with it, actually. I thought I'd finish by adding some extra highlights, and I have to play with the exposure of the camera because it's so hard to get the metallics to look right. And I did some extra silver chips and highlights, but you could do this. I didn't feel it made a massive difference, to be honest. It's quite nice on the focal areas, but yeah, you could do this if you want. This is definitely an optional step. If you want it to be really quick, then skip it out. But if you want more detail, then you can go ahead and edge highlight with a brighter silver, do some additional scratches and damage. Yeah, anything you want really. I did a couple spots, but I was pretty satisfied with what I'd done, so I left it there. Even a quick little dry brush with a small brush made a difference actually, so I would adjust this to taste. Now it's time for Tufts, which is my favourite bit, so I couldn't decide which ones to use. I've got spring, summer, autumn, pretty much every product from Mini, Nature. I'll make sure I link the description for those, and yeah, I just tried out a few, sticking them on the base. They are self-adhesive, but if you want them to be really solid, you need to PVA glue them down. Yeah, I tried the green ones, the really orangey ones, and in the end I decided to go for the spring ones. I kind of like the orange colour. It's a little bit different than your normal grass green, and I thought it'd look nice against the blue. I wanted to see what it looked like if I just covered the whole thing with them. Yeah, I think I went a little too far. I think leaving a little bit of the earth behind would have looked better. But anyway, I just PVA glued my entire base and just stuck them, yeah, covering the whole base. And I kind of like it, but yeah, I think a little bit of the earth showing through as well would have been better. But what the hell, it was fun to try. They are a little bit shiny, so I would recommend giving them a wash. You could oil wash them, I think that would work. I haven't tried it myself. And I actually airbrushed them with AK Ultra Matte Varnish, which of course dulls them down, makes them look a little bit drier and more realistic. And with that, I blue tack it to a plinth so it looks snazzy. And yeah, this is my finished Stormcast. And I hope you like it. If I was going to paint a whole army of Stormcast, I 100% would use this. Obviously, I went in with a plan, but you don't know exactly how it's going to go. And I think this turned out better than I thought it was going to in my head. You can see, you know, the plan was blocking all the metallics, wash the whole thing to make that body really, really simple. And for sure, that's going to be so easy to do across an entire army. And then put some more work into the face, but I hope you agree the steps weren't crazy. It wasn't overly complicated. Just trying to, you know, highlight that focal area and get the glowing eyes in there. And yeah, I think it looks really cool. The quality of the sculpt and the posing helps a lot as well. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I think having the silver with the battle damage and the oil weathering, that makes them a little more grim dark and, yeah, I think cooler in my opinion. And a really good face sculpt just helps to separate it. It also gives a nice contrast because you have the, you know, the matte skin where we painted with the AK paints and the shiny silver. It just really makes the head stand out again. So yeah, I hope you like it, and I hope you agree that this is definitely feasible to do an army like this. I'm really busy painting during this period, so I would have loved to have done more of the Skaven Tide box set. I'm doing some box arts for our upcoming Dareguard 2 Kickstarter, and a bunch of things like Golden Demon entries, so this was kind of all I could do for Skaven Tide, but I am really happy that I managed to have a go at one of these minis, and yeah, this is my favourite Stormcast I've painted. And I really like the normal ones, actually, instead of the characters. I think these basic troops are so fantastic, and that's really important when painting an army. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's nice for me to be on YouTube, as I'm normally hiding away over on our Patreon, and it was really nice to paint something quick and simple. And yeah, to be honest, I've got it on my desk, and I can't stop looking at it. Absolutely love it, and yeah, it's going to be hard to resist doing a few more of these. So yeah, please leave your comments. I hope you liked the video, and I will see you in the next one.